General, thank you very much for being with us. You say the president is providing clear guidance and is empowering the military to execute and deliver decisive outcomes in Afghanistan. Clear guidance. Can you have clear guidance without a clear statement on troop numbers?
Well, I think it's important that we don't communicate to the enemy exactly what our plans are. So I support the president when he said that we're not going to say how many and for how long. I think that was a failure of the previous administration when they said we're going to send these number of troops, but only for this long. I don't think it's good to communicate all those details to the Taliban. I do think, though, the president made clear that he wants to win and that pulling out would have been a disaster. So he, during the campaign, talked about that. I'm glad he switched on that, because if we would have withdrawn our forces from Afghanistan, I think within a year or 2 years, the Taliban would be in control, and we would have to go back in. So I appreciate his commitment to stay engaged in Afghanistan and to keep going after Taliban.
You say you used the word switch there, so you're acknowledging this was a different position than you heard from then Donald Trump in the campaign. Some people, including at Breitbart, say he flip-flopped.
Well, he switched from the campaign. He also changed what President Obama was doing. President Obama was doing time-based, standards. So I think we needed to really just measure our success and make decisions based off that. But I think the president made it clear that we cannot let the Taliban win. Otherwise, we'd have to go back in a year or two, just like we did in Iraq. And when we pulled our forces out of Iraq in 2011, that was a disastrous policy that we're paying for today. And I think he looked at what happened in Iraq, so we can't happen in Afghanistan.
The timeline, the end date, the removal of that does appear to be a very clear change, and that is something that would be referred to as a measurable here, removing that. As far as defining victory and defining the actual goals, listen to what the president said last night.
From now on, victory will have a clear definition: attacking our enemies, obliterating ISIS, crushing al-Qaeda, preventing the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan, and stopping mass terror attacks against America before they emerge.
So Raheem Kassam at Breitbart, which has been very critical, by the way, of the president's speech last night, noted that that list of victories, the clear definition of what a victory is, doesn't include real measurables. Attacking our enemies, that isn't a victory, is it, Congressman?
Well, true. I spent a year in Iraq. We had lots of measures of success that we looked at. When I got there during the surge, when General Petraeus showed up, all the standards that we were measuring looked terrible. We were having 120 Americans killed a month. You can measure the number of attacks, how much territory the enemy controlled versus how much territory the government was governing. We can use those same standards here in Afghanistan. And I think the president was saying somewhat of that, but that specifically, those are the things that we could measure. And we can measure how much the Afghan government has control of versus the Taliban, the number of attacks. And what you want to see is, over a period of time, those attacks going down. Right now, the Taliban controls about 45% of the territory in Afghanistan. That's unacceptable. We can measure that, and so I think there are clear measures that we can look at, and right now they don't look good.
All right, Congressman, politics now. The president headed to Arizona tonight to give a political speech. A lot of people still talking about his reaction to the violence in Charlottesville. House Speaker Paul Ryan told us here at CNN last night that the president messed up in his response to Charlottesville. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, on one hand, I think he was very clear that white nationalism and the Nazi party is terrible. I find they're a disgrace. I think what I would have said maybe a little differently is I would have stood with the protesters against white nationalists, against the Nazis. But I also think, and this was lost with some on the other side of the aisle, that no matter the rightness of our cause, we can't resort to violence. I don't care if you're on the right side of the issue or not. I didn't fight, and I didn't deploy 4 times to Iraq and the Middle East to watch Americans beating up other Americans. I think I did fight for freedom of speech, though. And so I'm concerned when I worry about the vitriol in this country on both sides. I think the president was trying to get to that. I think it could have been said a little more clearly, though.
Said a little more clearly. All right, Congressman Don Bacon, General, thank you very much for being with us. Appreciate your